James had been living alone in that log cabin on the edge of the town of Silver Creek, Colorado for 3 years. 3 years since a fever had taken his beloved wife, Margaret. 3 years in which each dawn seemed grayer than the last. His cabin was the first building you saw upon entering town. A solid log house boasting a spacious porch and a fireplace made of stone. It used to be filled with laughter and the smell of freshly baked bread. Now there was only silence and dust gathering in every corner. James was 35 years old, but his sun-beaten face seemed to bear the weight of many more. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hands rough from working the land. His blue eyes, which had once sparkled with joy, now stared at the horizon without really seeing anything. Each morning he followed the same mechanical routine, feeding the horses, checking the broken fences that he never finished fixing, making bitter coffee that he drank alone, sitting on the porch steps. The townspeople tried to help at first, bringing him food, inviting him to community gatherings, but James always politely declined. So he preferred his solitude, his private grief. The cabin that had once been a home brimming with love was now little more than a refuge. The curtains Margaret had lovingly sewn were faded. The garden she had carefully tended was a vacant lot overgrown with weeds. Even the animals seemed to sense the sadness of the place. His 2 horses, Thunder and Whiskey, looked at him with sympathetic eyes when he sat for hours lost in memories, tucked in memories. The ranch was 20 acres with a stable for 6 horses, though only 2 occupied it. An empty chicken coop where 10 hens had once gaggled, a well with fresh water near the house, everything he needed for a prosperous life. But without Margaret, none of it made sense to James. It was an October evening. The sky was tinted orange and purple as James sat in his porch rocker staring into space. The cold wind heralded the arrival of winter. He had lit a fireplace, but its warmth failed to reach his heart. Suddenly he heard something unusual. Footsteps, many footsteps. Soft voices in a language he did not immediately recognize. James slowly stood up. He was walking down the dusty road that led into town. He saw a figure approaching. No, several figures. A woman walked in front of her, and behind her were several children of various ages, walking in a single file like ducklings following their mother. When they reached their fence, James could see them better in the twilight. The woman was Apache. She was wearing an old-fashioned fur dress decorated with beads. Her long braided black hair fell over her shoulder. Her face showed extreme weariness, but also an unwavering dignity. She was in her 30s with high cheekbones and dark eyes that shone with dawn with Darmosaron. Behind her were 6 children of various ages. The oldest looked to be about 12, the youngest barely 4. They were all covered in dust. They had clearly been walking for days. Their clothes were torn, their faces dirty, but none of them were crying. They just stared with those big dark eyes, full of hope and fear at the same time. The woman stopped in front of the fence. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. James felt something strange in his chest, a pang of something he hadn't felt in years, compassion, curiosity, something else he couldn't name. "Excuse me, sir," the woman said in perfect Spanish, though with a unique musical accent. Her voice was soft but firm. "We've been walking for many days. Our people were scattered by conflicts with settlers from the north. They separated us. These children have nowhere to go. Neither do I." James slowly walked down the porch steps. The children instinctively pressed closer to the woman. The youngest, a little girl barely 4 years old with huge brown eyes, clung to the woman's skirt. "Yours is the first house we came across when we got here," the woman continued. We didn't ask for much. Just a place to stay for the night. Some water. We'll be on our way tomorrow, I promise you. James looked at each one. He saw the exhaustion on their faces. He saw how the oldest boy, trying to look strong, shivered slightly in the cold of the evening. He saw how the youngest girl could barely keep her eyes open. He saw in the woman's eyes something he knew well, the suppressed desperation of someone who must be strong for others. For 3 years, James had closed his heart to the world. For 3 years, this cabin had been his prison of solitude. But at that moment, looking at that Apache woman and her 6 exhausted children, he felt something break inside his chest, like ice melting in the spring sun. "Come in," he said finally. His voice was hoarse from disuse. He opened the fence and stepped aside. "There's plenty of room and hot food." The woman looked at him in surprise. He had expected rejection, perhaps hostility. Instead, she found kindness. Her eyes watered slightly, but she blinked quickly to hold back the tears. "Thank you, Lord. My name is Ayasha. It means little one in my language," though she added, with a tired smile as she looked at the children. "I'm not so little anymore." James Walker. The children timidly filed past. The smallest one stumbled over her own feet from exhaustion. Instinctively, James caught her before she fell. The girl looked at him with those huge eyes, frightened at first, then curious. "This is Bluebird," Ayesha said, introducing the little one. "The others are Eagle, the twins River and Stone, Spring Flower, and Dawn Sky." James nodded to each one as they entered. Eagle, the eldest at 12, walked, with his back straight, trying to look brave. The 8-year-old twins River and Stone looked so alike that it was impossible to tell them apart. Spring Flower was 10 and was wearing a small threadbare blanket. Dawn Sky, 6, couldn't let go of Ayasha's hand. As the 6 children and Ayasha entered their lonely cabin, something changed in the air. The house that had been dead for 3 years suddenly came to life with the sound of small footsteps and curious whispers. James closed the door behind them, unaware that he had just opened the door to something much bigger. His solitary life was over. A new story was just beginning. The cabin had never housed so many people at once. James watched from the kitchen doorway as the 6 children shyly explored every corner. Their small footsteps echoed on the wooden floor that had remained silent for so long. Bluebird, the youngest, approached the fireplace and stretched her tiny hands towards the warmth by a knee. Her little eyes were drooping with tiredness, but she fought to stay awake. With watchful eyes, Dawn Sky remained by the door, poised, as if prepared to flee at a moment's notice. The River and Stone twins sat together in a corner, pressed against each other. Spring Flower stared at Margaret's faded curtains curiously. Eagle, the eldest, stood close to Asha, his shoulders tense, ready to protect his family if needed. "They're hungry," James said. It wasn't a question. He could see it in their sunken faces, in the way Bluebird unconsciously touched his stomach. "We've eaten roots and vines along the way," Ayasha replied with dignity. "We don't want to be a burden." "They're not a burden." James walked toward the pantry. "I have stew from yesterday. Let me heat it up." As he stirred the fire under the iron pot, James felt everyone's eyes on him. It had been 3 years since he had cooked for anyone but himself. It had been 3 years since this kitchen had seen anything but lonely, sad meals. The aroma of the stew began to fill the hut. James saw the children's noses turn up, their stomachs growling audibly. Asha tried to keep her composure, but He could feel her gulping. I don't have enough plates, James said, suddenly realizing. There were only two of us, Margaret and I. We can share, Ayesha replied quickly. The children can eat in pairs. James shook his head, rummaging through the cupboards and pulling out cups, old bowls, even a couple of small casseroles. We'll improvise. She ladled the stew out in whatever food she could find. The children waited patiently until Ayesha nodded their permission. Then they ate with a suppressed desperation that tore at James's heart. It wasn't rude manners, just deep, honest hunger. Bluebird ate so fast she choked. Ayesha soothed her, patting her back, speaking softly to her in Apache. The girl took a deep breath and continued eating more slowly, tears streaming down her dirty cheeks. How long have you been walking? James asked. Ayesha replied, gently helping Dawn Sky to keep her bowl from falling. Maybe 9. I lost count. 8 days. James stared at her incredulously. With the children? We had no choice. When our camp was dispersed, each family went in different directions. I was left with these 6. Their parents. Some died in the escape. Others were taken to different reservations. The children clung to me. I couldn't abandon them. Eagle looked up from his food. Ayesha saved us. Once the soldiers showed up, she hid us all inside a cave. She kept us quiet for hours. Then she guided us through the mountains at night. You are brave, James said, looking at the boy. Then at I. They all are. Ayesha looked down. I only did what any mother would do. But you are not their mother. What is a mother if not someone who protects and loves? Ayesha stroked the bluebird's hair. These children are mine now. In my heart, they are mine. After eating, the children began to relax a little. The twins, River and Stone, explored the room with more confidence. They found an old checkerboard that Margaret had left behind. They looked at it curiously, not sure what it was. It's a game, James explained. He showed them how to play. The twins learned quickly, their eyes shining with excitement as they captured each other's pieces. Spring Blossom discovered a book on a shelf. She could not read English, but she liked the illustrations. Pages and pages of carefully drawn wildflowers. Margaret loved that book. You can have it, James said softly. If you want. The girl looked at him in surprise. Then she hugged the book to her chest as if it were a treasure. Bluebird finally fell asleep by the fireplace, curled up like a tiny kitten. Dawn Sky sat beside her, watching over her even in her own exhaustion. Ayesha watched all this with a mixture of relief and sadness. They're good kids, she said quietly to James. They've been through a lot, but they're good. I see that. James sat down in his old rocking chair. And do you have family? My husband died hunting 2 years ago. We had no children. When the camp was broken up, these kids needed someone. I needed a purpose. The night wore on. James brought blankets from his bedroom. There weren't enough for all of them, so he also pulled out his winter coat, a couple of old vests, anything that would keep the kids warm. Ayesha arranged the children to sleep in the main room, near the warmth of the fireplace. The twins huddled together under a blanket. Spring Blossom slept with her new book under her makeshift pillow. Eagle insisted on staying awake and keeping watch. Sleep, Yasha told her gently. We are safe here. How do you know? The boy asked, still wary. James answered from his rocking chair. Because as long as they're under this roof, no one will touch them. You have my word. Something in his tone convinced Eagle. The boy finally closed his eyes, though his hand rested near a stick he had picked up ready to defend his family. If necessary, Tisikame and Eri. Ayasha sat down by the fireplace. She began to sing softly, an Apache song that sounded like the wind through the pines. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. The children, who were still awake, relaxed at the sound. One by one, they drifted off to sleep. James listened from his rocking chair. He didn't understand the words, but he sensed the meaning. There was a song of protection, of love, of hope in dark times. When he finished, Ayasha looked at him. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Not for the food or the shelter, though I am grateful. Thank you for seeing us, for not locking us out. Many would have. James, he said. Just James. James, she repeated, testing out the name. Then, with a small smile, we'll leave tomorrow. We don't want to cause you any trouble. James looked at the 6 children sleeping in his living room. Bluebird snored softly. The twins smiled in their sleep. Dawn Sky had finally let go of her watch. For the first time in 3 years, their cabin felt alive. You don't have to leave tomorrow, James said slowly. You can stay a few days, until you rest, until we decide what to do. Ayasha looked at him, her eyes shining. Are you sure? No, James admitted honestly. But perhaps that was okay. That night, James slept in his own bed for the first time, feeling less alone. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, 7 tired souls rested safely. The lonely cabin wasn't so lonely anymore. The sun was barely rising when James woke to an unfamiliar sound. Laughter. Children's laughter. For a moment, disoriented, he thought he was dreaming. Then he remembered. His guests dressed quickly and left his room. The scene before him left him speechless. Ayasha was already awake, having started the fire, and was preparing something that smelled delicious. The twins, River and Stone, were helping to stack firewood. Springflower was sweeping the floor with an old broom. Eagle was outside. James could see him through the window, feeding the horses. Good morning, James. He greeted Yasha with a smile. I hope you don't mind. The children need to be kept busy. No, me. It's fine. James ran a hand through his disheveled hair. What are you making? Tortillas with what I found in your pantry. Flour, water, a little salt. I hope you don't mind. I don't mind. James walked over to the kitchen. It had been years since anyone else had cooked on your stove. It smells good. Bluebird was sitting on the ground, playing with some stones she had found. When she saw James, she smiled shyly at him. He smiled back, feeling oddly awkward. They ate breakfast together. The warm tortillas, though plain, tasted better than anything James had eaten in a long time. Maybe it was because he ate them in company. The horses looked neglected, Eagle said suddenly. Thunder's got a loose horseshoe. James looked at him in surprise. Do you know anything about horses? My father was the best horseman in our village, Eagle replied proudly. He taught me before he died. Then perhaps you can help me today, James suggested. I have some work overdue at the stable. Eagle's eyes lit up. Yes, sir. After breakfast, James and Eagle worked together in the stable. The boy was right about everything. Thunder needed attention. Whiskey was neglected. The reins were damaged. It had been 3 years of neglect. Why do you live alone? Eagle asked as he caught whiskey with expert movements. James hesitated. Then he decided to be honest. My wife died 3 years ago. I stopped taking care of many things since then. Like these horses. Like many things, James admitted. Eagle worked in silence for a moment. My father died too. He went hunting buffalo. An accident. I was 10 years old. I'm sorry. Asha says the ones we love never really leave. They live here. Eagle touched his chest. Do you believe that? James looked at the boy. 12 years, and she'd already lost so much. I want to believe it, she said finally. Some days are easier than others. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, Ayasha organized with the efficiency of a general. The twins fetched water from the well. Spring flower helped wash the dirty clothes James had accumulated. Dawn Sky cared for Bluebird, who insisted, helping by watering the dead plants in Margaret's garden. The plants are dead, Dawn Sky observed. But we can plant new ones, Ayasha replied, looking at the neglected garden. The soil is still good. It just needs love. By noon, the cabin looked different, cleaner, tidier, better. Asha had opened the windows to let in fresh air. She had shaken out the rugs. Margaret's faded curtains fluttered in the breeze. James went inside for lunch and stood in the doorway, stunned. This is different. I hope you don't mind, Ayasha said quickly. The children needed something to do, and I don't mind. James, interrupted Momom. It's just that this place hasn't looked like this in a long time. They ate a stew that Aisha had prepared with vegetables she found in the pantry and some dried meat. They chatted. The children told stories of their village, their parents, their lives. First Eagle spoke of his father, the great horseman. The twins told of their mischief, how they always confused everyone in the camp. Spring Flower spoke of her mother, who made the most beautiful blankets. Dawn Sky listened to the songs her grandmother taught her. Dosa. Bluebird just smiled and ate. Too young to remember much. James listened to everything, fascinated by these lives that had been cut short, these stories that deserved to continue. In the afternoon, he found Ayando in Margaret's garden. She had cleared the weeds, prepared the soil. If we stay a few more days, she explained, we could plant some things, fall vegetables, pumpkins, maybe carrots, bye. A few more days, James repeated. Ayasha stopped working and looked directly at him. We have nowhere to go, James. He knows, but we don't want to impose if he wants us to leave. No, James said quickly. Too quickly. He coughed. I mean, they can stay until they find something better. What if we don't find something better? Ayasha asked softly. James had no answer for that, but he looked around at the garden that was starting to come back to life, at the children playing in the yard, at Thunder and Whiskey, who looked happier than they had in years, anyways. Then maybe they'll stay, he said finally. That night after dinner, Ayasha taught James a few words of Apache. The children laughed when he mispronounced them. Bluebird sat on his lap without asking. She just settled there as if it had always been her place. James let her stay, surprised by how natural it felt to have a little girl confide in him like that. Eagle called James Cowboy Baba for the first time that night. It was a mix of English and the Apache word for father. James didn't correct the boy. He couldn't. When everyone else was asleep, James sat on the porch. Asha came out and sat beside him in silence for a long moment. Thank you, she finally said, for letting us stay. Thank you, James replied, for making this feel like home again. Weeks passed, and November arrived with its first frost. James could no longer imagine the cabin without the constant bustle of the children, without Ayesha's serene presence organizing everything with her quiet efficiency. A routine had settled in naturally, as if they had always been a family. Every morning, Eagle helped James with the horses and ranch repairs. The boy was a fast learner, his hands growing more skilled every day. The twins, River and Stone, took care of the water and firewood, turning each task into a friendly competition. Spring Flower helped Aina and the guardan learning recipes that blended Apache and cowboy. Dawn Sky took care of Bluebird, who followed James around, calling him Baba in Lena, in her sweet little voice. Margaret's garden had come alive under Ayesha's hands. Orange pumpkins grew plump on vines. Carrots poked their green tops. She had even planted some medicinal herbs she knew from her village. But peace would not last forever. One afternoon, as James was mending a fence with Eagle, he noticed something strange in the sky. Dark clouds were gathering on the northern horizon, moving fast toward them. Too fast. Storm, Eagle said, following his gaze. A big one. James nodded in concern. We need to get ready. Now. They ran back to the cabin. Ayesha, James shouted. A storm is coming. Bring everyone inside. The twins will bring all the firewood they can. Flower, close all the windows. Eagle, help me with the horses. There was no panic, just efficient movement. Ayesha had faced storms before. She knew what they meant. Here she gathered the younger children while the older ones moved with purpose. James and Eagle ran to the barn. Thunder and Whiskey were already nervous, sensing the approaching storm. There were 3 other horses as well, animals that the neighbors had left for them to care for. 5 horses in all that needed to be secured. Seal that door, James ordered as he secured the animals. The wind was already beginning to howl, and he checked for gaps where snow could get in. Snow. Is it going to be a blizzard? James looked out the barn window. The sky had turned a grim gray. Was it going to be bad? They had barely finished securing the barn when the storm hit with a fury. The wind roared like a wild beast. The snow began to fall so thickly that they could barely see the cabin just 20 meters away. James and Eagle ran toward the house, the wind pushing them, the snow blinding them. They almost disappeared in those few meters. Ayesha pulled them inside and slammed the door shut. Is everyone here? James asked, counting heads. Everyone? The wind shook the cabin like a matchbox. Snow piled up against the windows. The temperature inside the house dropped drastically despite the roaring fire in the fireplace. We need more firewood, James said. We can't let the fire go out, I thought. We brought all we could, River replied. Or maybe it was Stone. Even now, James sometimes confused them. It won't be enough. James looked at the pile. If this storm lasts for days, we'll need more. There's more firewood in the shed next to the barn, Eagle said. Too far. James shook his head. We can't risk it. The first night passed. The wind didn't let up. The snow kept falling. In the morning, when James opened the door, a wall of snow almost up to his waist blocked the entrance. We have to dig, he said simply. James and Eagle worked together to cut a tunnel through the snow. It was backbreaking work. The cold bit at their hands, even with gloves on. But they needed to get to the barn. They needed to make sure the horses were okay. They made it. The horses were scared, but alive. James fed them and gave them water from the well that fortunately hadn't frozen completely yet. The firewood shed is over there, Eagle pointed. We can make it. He was right, but they barely carried as much firewood as they could, making several dangerous trips between the shed and the cabin. On the last trip, James slipped on the ice hidden beneath the snow. He landed badly. His leg twisted beneath him. He heard and felt something crack. The pain was instant and blinding. James! Eagle screamed. The boy ran toward him, trying to help him up. My leg, James gasped. I can't. Somehow, with Eagle holding him up, they made it back to the cabin. James could barely put any weight on his right leg. Every step was agony. Ayesha saw them coming and knew immediately that something was wrong. Put him in the chair, she ordered. Flour, get some hot water. Honey, I need my herbs, the ones in the blue jar. James slumped back into the chair, his face pale with pain. It's just a sprain, he hissed. Let me see. Ayesha knelt in front of him. Her expert hands carefully felt his leg. James he grimaced as he touched a certain spot. It's badly twisted. Maybe something else. I need to splint it. Do you know how? James asked. My grandmother was a healer, Ayesha replied. She taught me long before she died. He worked carefully, using splints that Eagle quickly carved from firewood. He prepared a concoction from her herbs that smelled terrible but which numbed the pain a little when James drank it. He bandaged the leg firmly but not too tightly. You can't walk for days, he said finally. Maybe weeks. But I'll take care of the horses, Eagle interrupted. I can do that. We'll all help, Ayesha added. Rest now. The storm continued for 3 days. 3 days in which Eagle, barely a boy of 12, became the man of the house. He tended the horses, brought firewood, repaired a hole in the roof of the stable where the wind had torn a board off. The twins helped as best they could. Flower prepared hot meals. Sky kept Bluebird company, entertaining, and out of the way. Ayesha took care of James, changing his bandages, giving him his potions, making sure his leg healed properly. One night, when the wind finally died down a bit, Bluebird climbed into James' lap, careful not to touch his bad leg. Baba, are you better? He asked in his small voice. Baba is better, James replied, hugging her. Thanks to your Ayesha, Mama. The little girl smiled and snuggled up to him. James looked at Ai over the little girl's head. She was making tea, her profile illuminated by the fire in the hearth. I don't know what I would have done without you, James said softly. Ayesha turned to him. And we wouldn't know where to be without you. That's why we're family, James. We take care of each other. Eagle looked up from where he was carving a small wooden horse for Bluebird. Family, he repeated, testing the word. He liked the sound of it. Family, the twins agreed in unison. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to subside. But inside, in the once lonely cabin 7, hearts beat warmly, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. They had weathered the storm together and survived as a family. Spring came to Silver Creek like a promise fulfilled. The snow melted, revealing fertile soil ready to be worked. The creeks ran filled with fresh mountain water. The trees sprouted bright green new leaves. And in the cabin on the edge of town, an unconventional family was awakening to new life. James's leg had healed completely under Ayesha's care. He walked without a limp now, though she insisted that he not push too hard just yet. He obeyed not because he had to, but because he had learned to trust the wisdom of this Apache woman who had transformed his world, who had travaillé igria. The ranch looked completely different. The fences were mended. The barn gleamed with recent maintenance. The 5 horses were plump and healthy, their coats shining in the spring sun. Thunder and Whiskey especially seemed years younger, revitalized by the constant attention. Margaret's garden, or rather Ayesha's garden, was now a spectacle. She had planted everything, from tomatoes to peppers to squash to beans to corn. There was also a special corner with medicinal herbs and sacred plants from her people. String Flower worked there every afternoon, his hands learning the secrets that Ayesha generously shared. The children had grown in the months since. Eagle was now almost the same height as James. His shoulders were broadening, his voice deepening. He worked like a grown man, even though he was barely 13. James treated him like an equal partner, consulting with him on ranch decisions, teaching him everything he knew about raising cattle and working the land. And the twins, River and Stone, were as inseparable as ever. But now they spoke English fluently, mixed with their native Apache and the Spanish they all used to communicate. They made everyone laugh with their constant antics, though they always fulfilled their responsibilities. Don Sky had lost his shyness. Now he sang as he worked, his sweet voice filling the air. He had learned to read using the flower book James had given to Flower, and now he taught Bluebird his letters. But Bluebird, now 5 years old, was the light of the house. He followed James everywhere, his little hand always reaching for his. He called him Baba without hesitation, and he responded to that name with a love he didn't know he still felt. One April morning, James made a decision. He saddled Thunder and rode into town. He had avoided going for months, knowing that the neighbors would have questions, opinions, judgments about his situation. But he no longer cared what they thought. He entered the general store where Mrs. Henderson was manning the counter. The woman looked at him with ill-concealed surprise. "James Walker," she said. "It's been months since we've seen you around here." "I've been busy," he replied simply. He began gathering supplies, fabric to make new clothes for the children, sugar, coffee, flour in quantity, more than a single man would need. Mrs. Henderson couldn't help herself. "Word is, you have boarders." "A family," James corrected. "I have a family. I'm an Apache woman, and 6, she continued, lowering her voice as if it were a scandal. "People talk, James." "Let 'em talk." James placed his purchases on the counter. "I've had nothing but good things happen to me in years. If anyone has a problem with that, they can come and tell me to my face." Mrs. Henderson blinked in surprise. The James she knew was quiet, withdrawn, broken. This man before her had fire in his eyes, purpose in his stance. As he packed his purchases, James noticed something in a display case, a silver necklace with a turquoise stone in the center. It was beautiful, simple yet elegant. He thought of Ayesha, how she had worked from dawn to dusk, how she had healed his leg, how she had brought his home and his heart back to life. "That necklace," he said, pointing. "I want that too." Back at the ranch, he found everyone working on various tasks. Ayesha was in the garden with Flowers and Sky. The twins were mending a fence with an eagle watching over them. Bluebird was playing with an orange kitten that had appeared a week before, and that she had promptly adopted. That night, after dinner, James asked everyone to sit down. He had something to say. The children settled around the fireplace, curious. Ayasha dried her hands on her apron, waiting. 6 months ago, James began, you came to my door. I was a broken man, living in a dead house. I had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Bluebird came and sat at his feet, looking at him with those big trusting eyes. Says, you gave me my life back, James continued, his voice cracking slightly. You gave me purpose. You reminded me that there was still a reason to get up every morning. You gave me a family. You're our cowboy baba, Eagle said simply as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. And you're my children, James replied. All of you. He looked at each one, not by blood, but by choice, by love. He pulled the necklace from his pocket and turned to I. He said softly, you're the heart of this family, the one who holds us together, the one who made this house a home. Ayasha took it with shaking hands, tears shining in her eyes. James, I'm not a ring, he explained. I can't promise those things, but I can promise loyalty. I can promise that as long as I breathe, you and these children will have a home here. I can promise that I will protect you, I will care for you, I will love you like family, forever. Ayasha pulled the necklace to her chest. When we first got here, we were lost, scared, hopeless. Your home was just the first one we'd seen, but it turned out to be exactly where we needed to be. It wasn't a coincidence, Dawn Sky said softly. It was fate. It was love, Spring Blossom added. The twins looked at each other and smiled. It was family, they said in unison. Bluebird crawled onto James' lap. My baba, she said simply, hugging him. My family. James hugged her tightly. Then he held out his arms. They all came closer, one by one, until it was a group hug. Everyone huddled together, laughing and crying at the same time. Ayasha put the necklace around her neck. The turquoise stone glistened against her skin. Forever, she promised. This is our family. This is our home. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky pink and gold. The garden was blooming, the horses grazing peacefully. The cabin on the edge of Silver Creek was no longer lonely. It was full of life, of laughter, of love. Love. James Walker had lost one family to a fever 3 years ago, but fate, in its mysterious wisdom, had given him another. A chosen family. This family isn't defined by bloodlines, but rather by the shared love, by the shared work and the shared life we all experience. As the stars started appearing in the night sky, 8 people gathered around the fire, sharing stories, making plans, simply enjoying each other's company. A family, forever.